I'm back! Hello and welcome to Make a Little. My name is Taylor. I am a fiber artist based in Seattle, Washington, and I am on a quest to make a little art every day. If you've been following along for a while, and thank you so much to everyone that has, there's like 32 of you, which is an entire public school classroom, so that feels crazy. Thanks for following. But if you've been following for a while, you know exactly what this is. And if you're new here, welcome. Let me explain. So I just got back from a 3-week-long vacation. The first vacation that I have taken since 2017, so almost 10 years. It was to celebrate the fact that I had just turned 30. And it was really like I was gonna cram everything I could think of into these 3 weeks. I was really lucky and I was able to get them off from work. I have an extremely demanding job, and so this was in so many ways just like a celebration of being able to actually take some time off. So in those 3 weeks, I went to technically 3 countries, although I was only in Australia for like a 3-hour layover. But I was in Japan for 2 weeks, and then I was in New Zealand for a week. So to be clear, not everything on this couch I bought in Tokyo, which I think will be the title of this video. I had originally planned to kind of do a single video to talk about every acquisition I made on this trip. And as I was filming, I just realized it was getting really long and there was a ton of information that I needed to give you. And so I've decided to split it up into kind of general weeks or areas. So this one will be everything that I bought in Tokyo. Next week will be everything that I bought in Kyoto and Osaka. And then the last one will be everything that I bought in New Zealand, specifically Wellington and Auckland. So a couple of disclaimers before we get started. Number one, I don't want anything in this video to be construed as me encouraging overconsumption. While there is obviously a ton of yarn here, like I'm not going to gaslight you into thinking that this is just like a little bit of yarn. This was done really intentionally by me, and this was done with a lot of pre-planning, a lot of understanding what my stash was going to look like by the end of this, and with a lot of intention. And I'll talk through some of those intentions as we go through. This did not render me financially unstable. I specifically planned for this kind of a purchase, and I will be giving you prices, because one of the things that I really don't like about yarn hauls generally on YouTube is that people oftentimes don't talk about how expensive this is. And again, I'm not going to pretend like this was not an expensive endeavor. The other kind of disclaimer I want to make is that there is room for this in my stash currently. Sometime I'll give you a yarn tour. I think I've talked about it. I would call my stash like firmly medium-sized. And the way that I really approach art and approach knitting and crocheting specifically is that I need to have a little more than just the projects I have planned. I love and am really inspired by having a decent amount of yarn that I can kind of play with and try new color combinations, try new texture combinations, kind of be inspired. And so this amount of yarn coming into my stash is incredibly unusual, but also not overwhelming to me personally. And this is not to make any sort of a judgment on the size of your stash. You might have a much larger stash, you might have a much smaller stash. If you are comfortable with it, if you like it, that's awesome. Like that's all that matters. I think there's nothing wrong with being mindful about overconsuming, about buying more yarn than you can use in your lifetime, you know, all of those sorts of talking points that come through. But I just want to make it very clear that this was very intentional. This was not me like going crazy or blacking out or buying too much stuff. Like I knew exactly what I was gonna do here. And so I just wanna make that very clear. This is exciting and celebratory and a way that I am supporting something that's been really, really important to me for a long time. Like I mentioned, this is from the whole trip. So let's talk about all the yarn I bought in Tokyo. So I mentioned I had some overarching goals for this trip. And so let's talk about them. My first goal was that I wanted to make sure that I was only buying fiber that was made or dyed or particularly processed in the country that I was in. So while I was in Japan, I wanted to buy fibers that were specifically made and dyed in Japan. And while I was in New Zealand, I wanted to specifically buy fibers that were made and dyed in New Zealand. And I would say I stuck to that goal very well. I think everything I bought originated from the country of origin that I was in presently. And the big reason for this is, I could go anywhere and buy rowan. There was a ton of rowan in Japan. I was actually really surprised by that. I can get that at my local yarn store. I was really seeking out yarn that I would have had to import, so would have had to pay extra import fees if I was buying them in the States, or would have much higher cost because I was buying them in the States. The yarn shop had to pay the import fees, and also yarn that's just not accessible to me in the States. I would say that I met that goal really well. I got some fiber specifically in Japan, but also New Zealand, that I had never heard of, I had never seen, and that really was inspiring to me. So I'm really excited to walk you through all of that. The next goal was to not buy any yarn that I didn't have an idea for. And when I say an idea, I don't mean a specific pattern, although you will see that there was some yarn I bought specifically to knit a couple of pieces on my goals for 2026 list. But it's to have some sort of, inspiration, some sort of direction for it. Like I couldn't just pick something up and say like, oh my gosh, this is so cool, like I want to just buy it. And I'd not know like what it would look like knit up or crocheted up or what I would possibly make with it. And you'll see some of the B-roll that I put up of some of these yarn stores where I am like looking at yarn that fits into those categories where it's just so unusual or different or interesting. And I end up putting all of that yarn back because I know that I'm not going to use it. It will just sit on my shelf looking really interesting for years, and that's not the purpose of my yarn stash. And then the final goal that I had was to just kind of let myself breathe a little. Like I wanted to be inspired, and I wanted to buy fiber that inspired me. And so I know that maybe sounds contradictory with the second goal, but in my mind it's really not. It's more like if I do see something and I do know, like I do have an idea of what to do with it, to actually allow myself to purchase it. It might not seem like it, especially with, kind of the hauls that we're about to talk about, but I have been a really frugal person for basically my entire life. Sometimes out of necessity, oftentimes out of some kind of like anxiety. Like I've actually gone to a lot of therapy about my sort of frugality because I have this like weird feeling in myself that if I spend a little bit too much on something like frivolous or something I've deemed frivolous, that I'm going to be on the street starving. It's really not based in logic or rationality, and so especially as someone that is now like so lucky to be financially stable, there is kind of this song and dance I take myself through of like, you can't afford this, and if you do want it, and if you are inspired by it, you're allowed to prioritize your hobbies and you're allowed to prioritize your art. Like that's sort of the discussion I have to go through with myself. So there are a couple of these that had I been, on my best frugal behavior, maybe I wouldn't have purchased, but because I was really inspired and really excited and just full of a lot of just kind of knitspiration, for lack of a better word, I did let myself purchase those. And so between those three goals, I think I really stuck to it. And so let's talk about what I bought in Tokyo. To give you a preface, I'm sorry, there's like 800, kind of pre-discussions, but I think it's important to know what you're going to get into. So for each of these, I'm going to talk about the shop that they came from. I'm going to talk about how much they cost. I might need to put some conversions down below because a couple of them I paid for in cash, and that was yen. And I'm going to talk about kind of my experience with the shop, whether or not I really liked it, and kind of my final thoughts on that shop and whether or not I would recommend that you go to it if you are traveling to Tokyo. So for a little bit of data, in Tokyo, I went to 5 stores that sell yarn, and that's You'll notice that I didn't say 5 yarn stores because in Tokyo, it's very common to have like department stores that sell tons and tons and tons of things that incidentally sell yarn. And a couple of the ones that I went to were department stores that sold yarn. And I ended up making purchases at 4 of those stores. I will talk about the one that I didn't make a purchase on. It's nothing against the shop, and I really did try, especially if I was filming in these places, to at least buy something, because I think that's just polite. The one that I did not purchase something in was a department store that sold tons and tons of different things, and at the time I was feeling really, really overwhelmed with the language barrier, and I had just kind of landed, and because of that I just got like a little too overstimulated and just didn't end up purchasing anything, because I knew I was just gonna like end up grabbing something that I maybe didn't want, purely because I thought that I should buy something. So we'll get into that too. Every place that I talk about in this video is accessible via the Tokyo Station subway, and most of them were within walking distance of our hotel, which was in Kabukicho. So especially for Japan, I did a lot of like pre-research before I went, because I wanted to know, you know, what were the places that people were interested in going, what places did people like, and that sort of thing. And I think that was specifically helpful in Japan because of the language barrier. I do not speak Japanese. I learned about 12 phrases that I could use to be polite and order food and make purchases, but I don't speak Japanese and I can't read kanji. So a lot of figuring out like what fibers were or what weight yarn was. I definitely had to do a little bit of like Google Translate plus occasional very kind shopkeeper that happened to speak English to kind of figure out what a lot of this was. But like I mentioned, I went to 5 specific stores to purchase yarn and other kind of fiber accoutrements. And of those, 3 of them were actually department stores. So let's talk about the first one. I will put some B-roll over on the side here of these stores that just kind of like show some of the interior. It's going to vary how much B-roll I have, both because I wanted to make sure that I never put anybody in B-roll. Like, I would hate showing up in just like somebody's YouTube video, so no people show up in any of my B-roll. And as you can imagine, Tokyo is super crowded, so it wasn't always possible for me to get a bunch of different angles from stores that were full of people. And the other reason that there's not a ton of B-roll is that I am not particularly good at filming things. I know that seems crazy for somebody that like wants to and is trying this whole YouTube thing, but it's like an active effort for me to kind of pull myself out of the moment enough to pull my camera out. So some of this B-roll is actually credited to my boyfriend. Thanks for being the documentarian of our couple. But whenever it's there, I'll pop it up right here. So the first place that I went was a department store called Hands. And Hands is like a chain department store. There are tons of them in Tokyo, and I think probably across Japan as well, although I only went to Hands in Tokyo a couple of times. Hands, like I mentioned, is a department store, so it sells everything. It sells power tools and furniture covers and stationery and also craft supplies and yarn. And so the first thing I picked up was actually just one ball of this yarn called Dina. This is made in Japan. This is specifically a wool alpaca blend. And I was really looking for this yarn specifically. I think this might have been the only store in Tokyo that I found that sold it. But there's a YouTuber on here that I watched as part of my like kind of learning about yarn stores in Japan. I'll put their handle down below. I'm so sorry, I can't remember it. But she made a really beautiful scrunchie out of this yarn because it kind of like self-stripes. And I knew I really wanted to just buy a ball to make a couple of scrunchies. I love this colorway. Forgive me, I'm probably not going to have all the colorway names because most of them are in kanji. But it's just this really beautiful orange, green, brown, like very, very my colors, as you can maybe tell from my living room and my logo and everything else. But this was really beautiful. And I paid $9.26 total at Hands. I had to do a little bit of math because I'm not going to show you everything I bought in Japan, and I'm not even going to show you everything crafty that I bought in Japan, because I'm a really avid junk journaler, and so I bought a ton of washi tape while I was there and like general stationery stuff. And I don't know if anybody's interested in that. Like, if you're interested in junk journaling or what I bought about junk journaling in Japan, I mean, let me know. I would be so happy to put it on the channel, but for scope, I guess, I did have to do some math, and so this ball of yarn was only 500 yen, which I'll put the conversion down below, but that's quite low. So it was a real good deal at Hands. And that was all I bought at Hands. So the next place I went was really, really special. I would say there were 2 stores in Tokyo that just like completely inspired me. I loved my experience there, and I would completely recommend you checking it out. So this is, and I'm so sorry, I'm gonna butcher this name, I know it, but Tsuyosa Nakano Honten, which was specifically the Tsuyosa headquarters. And when I saw videos of people yarn shopping in Tokyo, I don't think I saw anybody shopping in this store, but just in general, when I saw B-roll of people shopping in Tokyo and Japan in general, the stores looked huge. I don't know how they took their footage in a way that made the stores look so large, but every yarn store I went to in Japan was actually incredibly compact. And that was really cool because in so many stores you would have like floor to ceiling yarn, and this was one of those places. Like, it was on every single wall, it was in the middle, like it was so densely packed with yarn. But I think also made shopping for yarn in Japan a little overwhelming for me. Like I mentioned, there was one store that I did not buy any yarn in because I was just like so overstimulated in it. But because I don't speak the language or read the language, more importantly, I felt like I was in everybody's way if I was like taking Google Translate photos of labels and like trying to figure out fiber content. And the reason that this experience stood out so much to me was that there was almost nobody there. Like, it was very quiet. The gentleman that was running the floor, because this is also like a large craft store. It's not just yarn. I think actually it's predominantly sewing, but they had 2 floors of yarn. The man running the counter on that floor, because they had a cashier for every floor, was so kind, could tell immediately what I was looking for, and in fact told me like, hey, just so you know, there's yarn on the 2nd floor too. And the 2nd floor was like my favorite. It was a beautiful day. The sun was like streaming through this place. I think I actually have quite a bit of B-roll of this because I spent a really long time in this store, but I found some of my absolute favorite acquisitions of my whole trip in this store. So first were these 2 cones of mohair. These are 50-gram cones of kind of like a multicolored mohair, and these were actually on sale. Like, they were in the bargain bin, and I couldn't believe that because I thought they were just so pretty. You can kind of see the colors here, but they're a little bit rainbow, like very orange, yellow, green, red. And then this one skews a little bit more like red, purple, blue. But I think that they actually are the same yarn, just spun up in 2 different ways. And there is a ton of meterage on these. I think, if I'm remembering correctly, it says it on here. Yeah, 650 meters per cone of this. So together, that's what, 1,300 meters? Like, that's a full mohair shirt. And that's kind of the dream with this one. I found a pattern, and I can't remember the name of it off the top of my head, but I'll put a picture in of it while I was actually on this trip, that I thought was so beautiful. And I think that this would be enough yarn to make it in my size. So I'm really hoping that that's true. And if not, this will become an extremely luxe hat scarf set because this yarn is just so pretty. I had to film this video because I've been itching to cast this on. But these are actually not the like star of this store for me. The star of this store is this. This might be my favorite acquisition from the entire trip. This is also mohair. I'm not totally sure if they intended for this to be dyed. This was on a shelf of its own. I know I have some video footage of me finding it, and it will be muted, but I definitely gasped when I saw this. This is a really beautiful mohair, the softest mohair I have ever felt. It was on a shelf on the bottom by itself, like illuminated by the sun. Just hanks and hanks of this. I don't know if you can tell how large this is. It's bigger than my head. Like, it's huge. This is so much mohair. And I paid about 5,500 yen for this. In total at this store, I spent $42.93 USD. And this was the majority of it. This was almost the entirety of that $42. And I couldn't believe it. I thought that this was going to be like $100. I think in most places it would be $100. But I wish that you could reach through the screen and feel this. It is so soft. It smells really sheepy, which I absolutely love. And it's 258 grams of mohair, which is just an insane amount of mohair. Like, I know I said like everything I had some idea for. This might be the sole exception because I just couldn't leave it there. But I'm gonna make something stunning with this. Like, I think I could do an entire mohair dress or cape, or I just want to make something absolutely massive, intricate lace with this. And I'm so excited to do it. Like I mentioned, I spent $42.93 at Tsuyosa, and that was the three acquisitions that I made there. So the next one is kind of a weird one because they actually don't sell any yarn. We spent a lot of time in department stores because there were just a ton of them in Tokyo, and I don't think I was prepared for like what a department store is in Japan, but they can be, you know, upwards of 13, 20 floors and huge. Like, every floor kind of feels like an entire US Target. Like, they are massive, and one floor might be H&M, and the other floor might be Uniqlo, and the next floor might be a Hands, or sometimes Hands has like 9 floors on its own. You know, one of them might be snacks, one of them might be coffee, one of them might be matcha. And in this case, this was just like a clothing and like kind of luxury goods department store that I actually can't even remember why we wandered in. I think it was because my boyfriend really wanted to buy a kitchen knife. He was looking for a really specific kitchen knife, and we thought we might find it here. But what's also very normal inside of these department stores are pop-up stores, which are basically like makers and small businesses that kind of take over like a portion of the store floor and sell their goods. And so I wasn't expecting to buy anything yarny here, but I happened to stumble upon a woman that was selling vintage buttons. And so I had to pick up a pair. These are them. They are really beautiful. I'm hoping that you can see all the details in them, but they are phases of the moon, including, a little wolf on one of them. Oh, the sun is streaming right into my eyes if I do that. I'll try to hold them up for you like this. But I just thought these were so pretty. I've got a couple of projects in mind that need buttons, and I really liked the idea of having these kind of fancy ones. These are made in Japan. Her company was actually called Silhouette Button, and she had a bunch of different buttons, and I believe I paid 700 yen for these. So I'll put the conversion down below so that you know exactly how much I paid for it, but it was not very much, especially for how beautiful of quality these look to be. I mean, I don't know for sure because the packaging is very sparse, but it looks like they've got kind of like a mother of pearl inlay in them. They at least have that kind of tonal shift like a mother of pearl would. And I just think they're so pretty. They're actually also quite heavy. So I was really happy with that purchase. It was very small, but it's just a good reminder to check out the department stores, even to just see some of the makers' stuff. Like, I did end up buying some small business stuff at department stores as well, just not relevant to this video, but a ton of fun, and I really loved these little buttons. The store that I didn't buy anything at was Okadaya. Okadaya is also a department store, kind of similar to Hands, but Okadaya, I believe, is purely crafting. Okadaya is really wonderful. There are a ton of people that have gone to Okadaya, and there are tons of videos of people going to Okadaya. There was a lot of yarn there that, like, when I look back at some of the footage, I'm like, oh man, I really should have grabbed some of that. Like, that mohair. There'll be a picture of it here. That mohair, it's called Onion. I think about that sometimes, like thinking about maybe buying that again. Or I think about that yarn sometimes still, like, dang, maybe I should have bought that. But that yarn kind of fits in with yarn that I don't know what I would do with. I don't really love working with variegated yarn. Like, I don't really buy variegated yarn, and so it wouldn't have really fit in with what I like doing, but it was so pretty. I mean, that purple and the yellow is so pretty. But like I mentioned, I got really overstimulated in Okadaya because there were a ton of people there, and there were a ton of people around the yarn. Actually, this was the store that I think I saw the most, like, non-Japanese people shopping at, and there was just a ton of people, like, taking pictures and going through the yarn, and, like, some people were kind of in a bit of a scramble to pick stuff up, and the store might have even been closing, like, in an hour or something, 30 minutes, whatever it was. I just got really overwhelmed by being in the store and just didn't end up buying anything. But really cool yarn store or craft store, and if you are in Japan, and Tokyo specifically, it's really easy to check out. There are actually a couple of them, I think, just kind of around the area. So with that, we're now at my final yarn store for Tokyo. And that is another really, really special one that I would recommend to anybody that is going to Tokyo, and that is the Tokyo Art Center. The Tokyo Art Center is really interesting because it's actually also like a dyeing workshop. Like, you can take classes there on dyeing yarn, you can take classes there on spinning yarn, and even like weaving. They do a ton of weaving. I was unable to take a class given just like the particular limitations of our schedule, but it seemed so much fun, and this was another one of the, like, most beautiful yarn stores that I visited. You could see all of the spun yarn on the walls. They had all of their dye bases just out, I'm assuming for their classes. And then they also had just these really, really beautiful, like, hand-dyed skeins. And that sort of, like, hand dyeing is just sort of like kryptonite to me. I love hand-dyed yarn. Again, I'm not really a variegated yarn person, but I love neps. I love marbling. I love yarn that's sort of, like, consistently patterned, and I love that kind of, like, inconsistency you get with hand-dyed stuff, where sometimes it's not, like, completely flat color, like, there are darker spots and there are lighter spots. I really, really love that. So this whole store, I mean, was amazing, and the young woman that was working there was so kind. She was really, really patient with me and my boyfriend as we were asking her about all of the different yarn bases and all of the different dyes that they were using. She brought up that some of the yarn that I was interested in buying was limited edition, which was really helpful because I knew I wouldn't be able to get it online if I needed more of it. And so I actually ended up buying two kind of colors of two different bases of their yarn. So this is the first one. I bought 6 skeins of this, so enough for a sweater. Or maybe you'll know if you watched my 2026 knitting plans, you know I really want to make the Twiggy dress. I think this would be a good contender, but I can't remember for the life of me what the weight of this yarn is. And the Twiggy dress requires, I believe, lace weight. And so I have a feeling that this is, or excuse me, not lace weight, fingering weight. I have a feeling this is not fingering weight, but I will check because I did accidentally in New Zealand buy yarn for the Twiggy dress that ended up being almost this exact same color. We'll talk about it in that video. And that one is fingering weight, so I'll use that if this is not. But if this is fingering weight, I would really like to do the Twiggy dress in this one. So this is this beautiful, just like bright, kind of rusty orange, and it's got neps in it that are kind of lime green and blue. Are you sensing a theme? I love green and orange together. I feel like maybe it's trendy a little bit because you'll see the yarn in New Zealand is like almost this exact same color. Like I love these colors together. And this is one of their limited edition colors, so I don't think they're selling this one anymore. And this is on a wool base of theirs. So I believe this is 100% wool, dyed and processed in Japan. And like I mentioned, I bought 6 skeins of this. That should be plenty for the Twiggy dress. I think the Twiggy dress takes like 2,100 yards, something like that. It's a pretty large endeavor. But if not, this will absolutely make a sweater of some kind. And again, I love this yarn. It's so pretty. I don't know if I can even do it justice, but it was so lovely. And then finally, the last thing that I purchased in Tokyo was also at the Tokyo Art Center. This is their cotton linen blend in this really, really pretty chartreuse, kind of lemongrass color. It's reading maybe a little yellow on camera, but it's reads quite green in person. This is my favorite color in the world, just about. I mean, orange and this, but this is my favorite color to wear. It's this kind of like chartreusey lime color. And there are a couple of different summer tops that I have been eyeing for a really long time, but I don't really buy cotton linen or any of the summer fibers. So this was a true gap in my stash that I have been looking to fill for a very long time. I actually didn't think I would find it in Japan, but this was just so beautiful, so pretty, and this should be plenty to do any sort of like t-shirt on my list. Maybe at some point I'll do my plans for the summer knitting, but this was a really wonderful acquisition. Now, unfortunately, I paid for the Tokyo Art Center yarn in cash, and so I don't have a specific record of it, but I might be able to find a receipt. Okay, I did find a receipt. I spent 20,130 yen at this store. That's quite a bit. That's probably the most that I spent on anything. I'll put the conversion down below, but I think that's about $150, $140. Sounds about right. But it was so worth it. It looks like that orange yarn was the bulk of it. That was 14,000 yen. And then the chartreuse yarn was 5,280 yarn. 5,280 yen. So that is everything that I bought in Tokyo. Again, just some like reflections and thoughts on what I purchased in Tokyo. I am really happy with all of my acquisitions. I have plans for each of them. I think they fit really well into my stash. They are yarns that in some cases, I have no idea really what they are, especially thinking like this mohair, this beautiful mohair blob. Like this is just some local processed something, which is just so cool. Like I don't know where I would even go to try to buy that again. So this feels really special. They feel really unique. I know they're not yarns that are accessible to me here in the States without pretty extreme tariff fees right now. So it was just a really great adventure. If I were to give you any tips for shopping in Tokyo, I would say wear comfortable shoes, just in general in Tokyo. Tokyo is so dense that you're going to be standing all the time and there are not very many benches to sit down on. So wear comfortable shoes. I think it might be useful to just learn the kanji symbols for like wool, cotton, whatever fiber of interest you might have, because I started to kind of recognize them by the end, where I could kind of tell like, oh, that's wool, oh, that's cotton. And you know, even if you don't necessarily know the language, just kind of seeing them pictorially might be helpful. I would also say, don't be afraid to ask for help. I was shocked by how many people I met in Japan that spoke fluent English. It's probably one of those sort of like Western exceptionalism, biases, but I've never gone to Asia before, and I really didn't know how many people I could expect to know how to speak English. And especially in Tokyo, it was a ton of them. So I would encourage you, if you're really struggling, to ask a question. And most people are also completely capable of using like the Google Translate app, and they'll chat with you. I was also really taken with just how polite every shopkeeper was, every person I spoke with. Like I mentioned, the young woman at the Tokyo Art Center spoke to me for like, sorry, the sun is just like doing something crazy right now. The young woman at the Tokyo Art Center spoke to me for like 25 minutes. We might have been the only person in the store for a long time. And she was really excited and interested in hearing about where we were from and what we were interested in and what kind of crafts we did. So I had such a blast just connecting with people about fiber arts and about yarn. And there's a ton of crafty, yarny people in Tokyo. The one store I did not make it to that I really wish that I could have, but it just happened to be closed on the day that I was in the area, was Amimoto Spin. I know that they do their own yarn brand that I didn't see anywhere else, and it would have been really cool to see them, but I also know that they tend to range a little bit higher on the price side, and while I am kind of in my buying, high quality fibers era, so to speak, I knew I didn't want to spend like a ton of money. I knew I wasn't going to be buying any cashmere, for example. As tempting as it was, I knew I wasn't going to be buying anything like that. So it might have been a good thing that I didn't end up at Amimoto, but I know that they have a cafe, and I would have really liked to do some knitting at the cafe. I'll put down the total of how much money I spent in Tokyo down below. I don't have it off the top of my head because some of it is in yen still, because I did buy some things in cash. So I'll convert it all and I'll put it right here, and you can see, you can decide whether or not I made good choices. I feel like I made fine choices, but to each their own. But yeah, I had an absolute blast in Tokyo. I would love to go back, and if you are on your way to Tokyo, you should absolutely check out their yarn stores and their stationery stores too, if you're into anything else kind of like paper craft related. So let me know down below what your favorite acquisition was, and whether or not you would like to go to Tokyo sometime, or if I missed any stores that you think somebody going to Tokyo would absolutely love. Please put them down below. I want to know for my next trip, in 10 years from now. But with that, have a great day or a great evening or wherever you may be, and I'll see you next time. Bye.